latest weeks of battles and horror in the Bakhmut and Soledar areas, plus the appointment of General Gerasimov to overview all the Russian operation, told us that Russia is stepping up its military strategy. And that's not a good news at all. In a few days, thousands of young soldiers died on both sides. In addition, we witness also cities destroyed, and for the first time the use of ballistic missiles that aren't interceptable by any missile shield. So at this point we need to ask ourselves, it is time to send new tanks to Ukraine? Or what is the possible alternative? As we mentioned in our previous video, the West strategy till now brought only disruption and deaths to Ukrainians. In addition, NATO has strong bill of money and weapons in a conflict that can be sustained in the long term. Tragically, we can witness how Russia quickly redeploys soldiers, firearms and ammunition daily, and how long it takes for Ukraine instead. Ukraine must wait for NATO decision, logistic organization and most importantly, to convince countries that are starting to feel the pain of this conflict and the senseless strategy adopted by the West. All of this, it tells us two things. Ukraine doesn't exist anymore as a nation. It doesn't have an economy, and it's fully relying on West money and weapons. And in the long term, Russia is going to win what is becoming now a war. But why Russia is going to win? After what we mentioned, we have a clear picture of reality. Despite the West's lies about the lack of ammunition, morale and weapons among the Russians, reported since March 2022, Russia is now starting to show their real potential. And let's make it clear, Russia didn't escalate yet what still remains a military operation. But unfortunately, this military operation is evolving into a war. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the West propaganda mocked Russia for their incompetence and disorganization on the battlefield. And nevertheless, President Biden was so happy that he called for action to remove President Putin. Probably, the West thought that they can change regime in Russia by imposing sanctions and breaking the Russian military, so that protests might start and then overthrow President Putin. But some details makes Russia different from Libya or Iraq. The strategy is clearly not working, and therefore Russia must change its approach to end this conflict. Russia didn't destroy Ukraine at the beginning of the invasion. Instead, they had a gentle approach for how crazy it may sound. They tried to limit the damage by reaching Kiev and remove Zelensky, and probably restore Yanukovych as president of Ukraine. But the West started to send weapons instead of using diplomacy. And this was done also to test the capabilities of the Russian military. But unfortunately, a couple of setbacks and a soft approach brought Russia in the position to change its strategy. As a result, the rain of missiles and soldiers are destroying Ukraine. So why the West must not send tanks now? First, the West itself is running out of ammunition and weapons. Then they don't have the capabilities to supply Ukraine at the same pace Russia can do it with its soldiers. That gives us an idea of Russia's power, despite the Western claim. To give you some example, Poland till June 2022 sent more than 200 tanks to Ukraine. But Ukraine received also thousands of other weapons from NATO. And in addition, during the counteroffensive in Kharkiv, Ukraine got several tanks and weapons from Russia itself. And what did Ukraine achieve? Someone may say the liberation of Kherson and Kharkiv. Right, but are those cities really free and safe? Did Ukraine fight, or was Russia abandoning that position? All of this is just propaganda. The reality is that Ukraine is on its knees, and if Russia decides to launch an offensive in Kiev, Ukraine risks to end its existence. Let's be clear, this is not just to take one side or another. It's not to support Russia or to support Ukraine. At this point, we just need to find balance, logic and compromises. The West, for example, sent anti-missile system to Ukraine. But anyway, the energy infrastructure have been mostly destroyed, And Russia now is using ballistic missiles that not even NATO can intercept. So if the West is running out of ammunition, what they are going to send to Ukraine? And how many tanks are necessary to liberate the Crimea or the Donbass? Thousands and other thousands of soldiers. Does Ukraine have them? No. And NATO can supply them. Are you starting to realize how crazy is the West strategy? But if those weapons somehow should reach Ukraine, then we will be a step closer to a World War III. With all the nuclear implication we already know. The situation is really serious now. But is the West going mad? We must understand that Russia is a superpower, both politically and militarily. And that the West, instead of seeking diplomacy, is doing everything it can to escalate the conflict into a larger war. This is scary, dangerous and horrible. And the people of the West should wake up from the propaganda and ask for peace negotiation and compromises on all sides. But what can happen if Russia starts a war? Well, Russia can seriously start to use aviation, ballistic missiles, and from what the rumors say, other 500,000 soldiers. Now, if Ukraine is struggling to fight less than 200 Russians on the battlefield, imagine what it will mean to add another 500,000 soldiers. But not only, Russia can fully destroy energy infrastructure, railway, airport, communication system, causing horrible collateral damages to the Ukrainian population. I think we can all agree that Russia didn't do that yet, not because they are not capable of doing this, but because they are still trying to save what they can in Ukraine and probably find compromises so that this conflict can be solved through negotiation. But there is something more. Russia may cause the biggest migrant crisis Europe has ever faced. A violent invasion from Belarus will destroy Kiev and significant other part of Ukraine. This will force millions of people to seek help and hospitality in Europe. But there is an important detail to consider. The EU isn't ready to manage something like this. At this point we must think, because the consequences and implications are dangerous now. Is the West ready for this tragedy? Now that we understood that to defeat Russia, Ukraine needs thousands of tanks, weapons, missiles, men, and who knows what else is needed, we should condemn the West strategy and ask instead for negotiation. Which one can be a possible alternative to end the war? Chancellor Scholtz is facing right now incredible pressure from extremist allies like Poland or the United Kingdom to send new tanks to Ukraine. Scholz is fortunately resisting it. And what instead if Scholz and Macron fly to Moscow to negotiate new conditions? For example, the West will not send any new weapons to Ukraine and Russia stop its military operation. Then at this point propose a political solution that, as we know, must involve a compromise on all sides. In our view, there is no other way out after all we discussed till now. Ukraine will lose the Donbass and Crimea. Russia will leave the other occupied territories. The United States will sign a deal where Georgia, Moldova and Ukraine will never join NATO. But they will offer them military assistance in case of any aggression. This is not the solution to the conflict, but it's one of the possible solutions. That's why negotiation tables are needed and immediately. Some of you will say that all of this is crazy, that only Ukraine can decide its future. Then okay, but without weapons or money coming from the West. Otherwise, the West has all the right to find the best solution to end this conflict. And especially the West has the duty and the responsibility to prevent a violent escalation of the war that will cause thousands and thousands of deaths. As we mentioned, compromises are needed in all sides. It's not time anymore for fairy tales and extremists. Those who care for Ukraine must push for negotiation and peace talk and accept compromises. But as we try to describe, Ukraine's military situation can get terribly worse, and the luxury of concession and negotiation won't exist anymore. Wise people work to avoid death and war. Are we still wise? That's the question. My name is Giovanni Basta and this is Politically Fair. If you like the video, share it with your friends and let us know your opinion about a possible solution in the comment section below. See you in the next video with a new story.